This is an Audio Wool original.
Yo, yo, yo.
Happy Election Day!
Yeah.
You excited?
Happy. I'm super excited.
Sounds like you're doing really well.
Feeling great.
Instead of me doing one of those boring, like, hey guys, Byron here, unfortunately, speeches, like I usually do when we air something that isn't a regular episode, I thought I'd give you a call.
Oh.
And we would talk a little bit about what we're doing for this week.
Oh, yeah. Well, you guys, if you weren't already feeling really horrific about the election, you guys have the opportunity now to listen to a completely depressing and soul-crushing Byron Serial Corner.
Yeah, it is actually the first live Byron Serial Corner that we recorded at this year's Camp Frightday. Sorry,
Yeah.
Oliver's whining at the door, if you guys can hear
That's
that.
because Oliver knows that it's a horrible story.
I mean, he isn't prepared, and neither are you, listener, unless you are one of the attendees at Camp Frightday, and I swear to God we're going to stop talking about it at some point.
Never.
Start talking about spring camp.
Oh, yeah. The spring camp. Whew.
I guess just for our mental health this week, we decided to take it off. I was on a jog preparing for our next episode, which is going to be Possessor, Brandon Cronenberg's latest film. I couldn't do it. Usually it's a Kelly thing. I couldn't mentally handle the idea of editing a podcast pre or post-election this week. So this is what we're doing, and this is coming out Election Day. So I want to say, if you haven't voted yet, you should vote.
Well, only if. Just kidding.
Okay.
Go
Yeah,
vote.
No. It's your civic duty. Go vote, and we'll keep you company in line with this episode of Byron Serial Corner.
Yay.
All right.
Happy
Election Day, guys. Tweet us if you need anything. We'll keep you company. We'll be there in line with you. So at Frightday on Twitter and Instagram, and we'll see you next week with Possessor. Here's Byron Serial Corner live from Camp Frightday.
Good luck, guys. Stay safe.
Stay safe.
Okay, bye.
Bye. I'm about to play one of my favorite sounds that I've ever edited together. And that, of course, the sweet sounds of...
Fire emergency.
Please don't touch this, listen. I'm sorry.
Today they found the bodies of at least 3 young boys, 6 more bodies under the John Gacy house in...
One longtime acquaintance describes Dahmer as one weird dude.
Stay tuned for Byron Serial Corner.
Love it.
All right. So over the last few weeks, I've sat down almost a dozen times to write the intro to this report, something that would depict the youthful excitement of sleepaway camp in the 1970s, an innocent, simpler time. The weight and the devastation of the innocence that was lost and shattered, I couldn't get it. And then I heard this clip, and I gave up.
There's a place in all of us reserved for the uncluttered simplicity of good thought. It is a harbor for sweet memories and special moments. It's a refuge where things are remembered through the innocence of a child's eyes. It's a place of carousels and unicorns, of treehouses and slumber parties, and of backyard tents and whispered secrets with a trusted friend. Here, puppies stay puppies.
They do.
Kittens stay kittens.
Them as well.
And your favorite pet is as brave as you wished. Hugs are plentiful here. In bare feet and cutoffs, battles are fought on stick horse chargers, and the white knights always win. In short, it's an endless summer camp of swimming hole days and lightning bug nights. But in 1977, at a Girl Scout camp in Oklahoma, all of that changed.
Sam, you're absolutely right. That is the voice of minor outlaw and multi-platinum recording artist John R. Cash. Johnny Cash, the man in black. I don't have the bass baritone timbre to spin a yarn like that, so I did what any respected researcher would do and completely stole the introduction to the 1993 documentary film Someone Cry for the Children, which, along with...
That is the 90th name for a thing that has ever been a thing.
Yeah, I mean, you should see the titles. I used that along with the Camp Scott murders, by C.S. Kelly. They served as my main sources for this story. A story that starts on June 12th, 1977, near Locust Grove, Oklahoma. You ever been there, Sam? You ever been to Oklahoma?
I have never been to Oklahoma.
I have.
Really nice. A lot of really nice people that I've met from Oklahoma.
Well, I almost got beat
real
up by
shit
a
stuff,
gang of
too.
punks that were on meth. We were trying to skateboard in their, those rivers that are made of cement. We were trying to skate in there, and they chased us out of there almost as if it was some sort of Oklahoma version of Locals Only. But
they probably lived there
they did
in the cement river.
Maybe. I'm not certain. Camp Scott is a 410-acre camp named after H.J. Scotty and Florence Scott, who were both they were Tulsa Boy and Girl Scout volunteers, very well known in the area. And it started as a 24-acre camp and grew over the years as they used the money that they made from selling Girl Scout cookies to expand, which that's a lot of cookies. 24 to 410 acres? It's a big expansion.
Well, I mean...
How many Thin Mints you gotta buy?
It's like ordering furniture from Wayfair. You're not just getting the cookies.
I did just get that couch. No boy sewn into the back. We've got to talk to Professor Pizza about that. The camp was arranged into 12 sites, each named after Indian tribes, most of which I would mispronounce if I tried, so I won't. But I do know that almost 140 Girl Scouts bust into the camp that day in June, barreling down a road called Cookie Trail. Yeah, Cookie Trail, off of, I believe, 84, which is a pretty interesting name for a road. These children do know better than me in terms of pronunciation, as they excitedly yelled the names of each one of these camps as they passed the signs in unison. I'll actually try to say a couple. Well, I can say a couple of them. Chickasaw, Creek, Seminole, Arapaho, Comanche, and then they turned right past the staff house, which was right past there was the last unit. It was the Kiowa camp. This is the furthest west and most isolated of all the camps. Distance aside, it was also surrounded by dense forest. You ever been to summer camp, Sam? I've never done an overnight.
Yes. Yeah, I was a couple.
Yeah?
Yeah. Church camp, surprisingly.
I was going to say, it sounds like a cult thing with your reluctance to talk about it.
Anyway, they would take me. I think it wasn't like, my parents weren't like, here, go, find Jesus. They were like, hey, here's some money. Will you take our kid?
Sure, of course.
When they did.
Unsure if that's what the situation was, but nonetheless, the bus doors opened and 27 girls ages between 8 and 10 skipped off the bus to Kiowa camp. I'm assuming they're skipping because it's the 70s and they're Girl Scouts that are in the single digits to age 10. And they were assigned to one of 8 tents, each with 4 tenants. The tents themselves were like 12 by 14 feet with canvas sides that could be rolled up. And they sat on top of wood platforms and held 4 cots. At the farthest corner of the most isolated camp, Tent 8 would be the temporary home for only 3 scouts, Doris Denise Milner, Michelle Heather Guys, and the youngest of all the scouts in the camp, Lori Lee Farmer, who was only 8 years old. Due to an error, the 4th tent mate was actually assigned to a different tent, so this bunk, one of them, was empty, which she may have been lucky. As evening came, so did a storm, and after a meal at 6 p.m., rain kept the campers in their tents, which was a perfect time to get to know each other and to write letters. They were letting their loved ones know that how they were settling in and how their first day at camp was. Michelle wrote a letter to her aunt. Dear Aunt Karen, how are you? I'm fine. I am writing from camp. We can't go outside because it's storming. Me and my tent mates are in the last tent of the unit. My tent mates are Denise Milner and Lori Farmer. My room is shades of purple. Love, Michelle. Last detail, I believe she's talking about her homeroom.
Oh man, you're really setting this up.
I'm so
That's
sorry.
grim shit, dude.
Well, Michelle, she was shy, but she was well liked by all the students. She was an avid reader. She loved plants, and her favorite was the African violet, which I don't know much about. You ever see an African violet plant?
Yep.
Is it a cool plant?
Very cool.
It's
Oh,
purple.
great.
Pretty.
She must love purple.
Oh, because violet.
If you touch them, they die. They're very high maintenance.
Really? Well, that's interesting. She actually asked her mother to take care of the plant while she was gone, so she must have really trusted her mother.
I've killed everyone that I've ever owned.
This wasn't Michelle's first rodeo. It was actually her second year at camp. Denise Milner taught herself to read and write at age 4.
No.
And anytime...
What are you doing with that?
Are you talking to your 4-year-old daughter? Oh, it's Kelly.
No, I'm talking to my wife. She's got my Stein.
Oh, wow. She's got a Stein?
Is it full of risotto?
Probably. Denise, though, she's as smart as a whip. Anytime she didn't know something, she went to a library to look it up because it was the 70s. She participated in gymnastics, skating, and tap dancing. And her letter was to her mother. She said, "Dear Mom, I don't like camp. It's awful. The first day it rained. I have 3 new friends named Glenda, Lori, and Michelle. Michelle and Lori are my roommates. Mom, I don't want to stay at camp for 2 weeks. I want to come home and see Cassie and everybody. Your loving child, Denise Milner." So Cassie was her 5-year-old younger sister who she absolutely adored. And although she did sell Girl Scout cookies to save up for this trip, she didn't want to go. But her mom said that she should go because everyone else was. But if she did want to come home after the first night, her mom said that she would come pick her up. Now Lori. Lori was the youngest, again, super bright. She could recite the Pledge of Allegiance at 16 months old. She was a true patriot. 2 months after that, she could recite "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" from memory. I don't have any kids, and I don't even think I could get past the first couple lines of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." Sam, 16 months, could your daughters do the Pledge of Allegiance?
I don't know. It never came up.
You didn't teach it? Come on. You're not a patriot, Sam.
She...
I mean, the Pledge of Allegiance to America?
That's the one, yeah. Pardon me, I'm sorry. I forget other countries exist.
Pretty nice, oatmeal smears that looked... kind of like whatever you wanted them to. But that's like written communication, which I think is even better than memorizing stuff.
Yeah. Well, Lori, this young lady, she skipped the 2nd grade because she had a tested IQ of 130. Have you tested your children's IQ yet? Kelly would tell you IQs don't matter.
Yeah. They're like 400 or 500.
Oh, great. Makes sense. She wrote a letter to a couple people.
The one that ate the penny the other night is like 700.
All right. Lori said, "Dear Mommy, Daddy, Misty, Jolie, and Collie.
Oh, no.
We're just getting ready to go to bed. It's 7:45. We're at the beginning of a storm and having a lot of fun. I've met 2 friends, Michelle Geis and Denise Miller. I'm sharing a tent with them. It started raining on the way back from dinner. We're sleeping on cots. I couldn't wait to write. We're all writing letters now because there's hardly anything else to do. With love, Lori." Her 9th birthday would have been 6 days after she arrived at camp, but she never saw it. Counselors always expect the first night of camp to be a restless one. Scouts with new friends finding it hard to sleep. But on a rainy night like this, I'm sure thoughts of the strange things that had been happening just a few weeks earlier must have come into mind. Just months before, counselors had gathered for a Girl Scout cadet weekend. A girl named Michelle Hoffman returned to her tent, finding it fucked up, messed up, turned inside out. She said, quote, "Our bags had been scattered all over I wrote something wrong there, pardon me. Our bags had been scattered all over, and some of it was outside. She picked up the box of donuts that she'd brought to share because she's a nice lady. Inside was nothing but crumbs, Sam. They ate all the donuts, but they left some notes. Quote,
it's probably just a dad. That's what happens at our house.
They weren't IOUs, Sam. These were 4 or 5 loose leaves of paper from a tiny notebook. On the first 2 or 3 pages, written over and over again, was the word kill.
Oh.
And on one of the other pages, it said, quote, "We're on a mission to kill 3 girls."
Oh, no, not that part. Sorry. Wrong notebook.
Yep, Michelle Hoffman took the note to the camp director, who said she'd look into it. But apparently the notes were thrown away after a group of girls at the camp confessed to doing it as a prank. But no one knows for sure. They don't have the notes, and who knows if it was a prank. It could have just been pinned on someone and passed along.
So they had different standards for evidence in the 70s.
Yeah, it's just assumptions? Is that what it is?
Yeah, this isn't evidence.
Well, we'll get
I'm
into
assuming that what they find at some point becomes evidence, though. So.
And we'll get into that. In the hours before camp actually started, a guy named Ben Woodward, who was a camp ranger and caretaker who lived on site, he found a slashed tent flap and a 3 to 5 inch square cut out of one of them as well. But he ignored that. Around the camp, one by one, lights went out. Before turning in, a lot of the girls engaged in a little horseplay with their flashlights. And last night we talked a lot about flashlights. Sam, how many flashlights should you have on you at all times?
How many pockets do you have?
Exactly.
And how many can you fit around your head?
So one of these girls, horseplaying with flashlights, her name was Amy Sullivan. She was 10 years old, and this was her first time at camp. When she finally switched off her flashlight, she recalled, quote, "It was the darkest dark I had ever known. I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or shut," which I believe she also recalled that it was both spooky and kind of relaxing, which I do like being out in the middle of the woods. I have a cabin in Lincoln, Montana, and there's something about the darkness. Even we don't live in a huge town, but the ambient light from our city, you can see it. When you're out in the woods, it's dark. And this night...
to actually see the Milky Way?
Yeah. This night it was very dark, and the clouds were blocking the stars as well. As midnight came, Counselor Carla Wilhite was awoken by a strange noise coming from the tree line off the road. Quote, "Something like a cross between a frog and a bullhorn, low and guttural, seemingly inhuman, but unlike any animal she had heard." So she got out of her tent and woke up another counselor. Outside, the sound continued, mixed with the murmurs of restless campers. Flashlight in hand, she walked towards the sound, but as she raised the beam and pointed it in the direction of the mystery, whatever or whoever it was fell quiet and froze. Carla did a quick walk around the tent and returned to hers and fell back asleep. Around 2 a.m., a light was seen inside Kiowa camp. It would disappear for minutes, then reappear on the other side of the unit. As the counselors slept, the entry flaps were removed from all the tents. Personal possessions like purses and glasses were taken from inside. Light flooded the inside of tent 6 as a flap whipped open. Inside, the campers who were awoken by this laid still, kept their eyes closed, assuming it only to be a counselor, making sure that they were asleep. The flap closed, and the light floated towards the farthest away tent. Number 8. Units surrounding Kiowa camp later reported strange guttural sounds. One scout recalled the sound of a girl crying out for her mother.
Oh, jeez.
Kelly is doing you can't, she's in a chair on the other side of the camera here, doing friendship bracelets and just making noises like she's consistently surprised at how disgusting Byron is as a human.
I'm really sorry.
Oh, Kelly.
As morning came on June 13th, Counselor Carla got up early and headed towards the showers, because at this hour there is guaranteed hot water and peace and quiet. She was going to be the first one there. But she didn't find peace and quiet. On her walk, she saw 3 sleeping bags on the ground off the road, assuming that this was just luggage that had either fallen off or was dropped off late. As Carla got closer, she was horrified by what she saw. It was Denise Milner, partially nude, badly beaten, and clearly dead, lying outside of her sleeping bag. In a panic, counselors did a tent check while the nurse and camp director tried to make sense of the scene. What could have done this? They quickly realized that there were 2 other missing campers, and there was 2 other sleeping bags. Richard, the husband of the camp director, careful not to disturb the scene too much, picked up the bags and felt the weight of what was inside. He was shocked at how the bodies were seemingly crumpled at the bottom. The Highway Patrol, Sheriff, FBI, and Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation was called and soon arrived. 3 ambulances were requested. The OSBI would head the investigation. This is how Agent Michael Wilkerson described the scene.
This was a crime scene like none I had ever been to before. The best way to describe it would be the reverence of a church. People were talking in low whispers. They were quiet. As I look back at it now, I don't even recall birds singing. We walked over and there were 2 bags. I know the first thing I was struck by is how tiny, tiny, tiny the figures were in the sleeping bags. I don't know why I never related, at least to myself, that these were tiny, tiny children. They took up only one small portion of the sleeping bag, and laying near the sleeping bag was a little black girl about probably 10 years old, and somebody had covered her with one of the sleeping bags. We opened the first sleeping bag, and there was a tiny little blonde-headed girl laying in the sleeping bag. And I remember Kerry, as he snapped the picture, as we opened the sleeping bag, all he could say is, "My God, my God." And they declared her dead. And we checked the 3rd bag, which contained another little small girl, darker-headed, who was bound with her hands behind her back. And, of course, she was dead, too.
Did Sam just start drinking again? I'm really sorry.
Good time to start.
Tape, rope, and gags. Whoever did this came prepared. Upon investigation, it was determined that the killer entered the back of the bunk and struck the girls while they were still in their bunks. Blood splatter on the canvas walls of the tent suggests that Lori and Michelle died there. Denise had her hands secured behind her back with black electrical tape and was gagged and forced to walk out of the tent. Unlike the other girls, she was strangled with a piece of cord. I'm going to skip a lot of details here, but yeah, subsequent testing showed that they had all been sexually assaulted. As far as the bludgeoning goes, a confirmed murder weapon was never determined, but they did discover a crowbar and empty beer bottles in the woods nearby. With the bodies 150 yards from their tent, I'm not exactly sure what the killer or killers were trying to do, but it seems like maybe they were trying to get the bodies far away from the scene. Maybe they were interrupted. Because the killer had tried to clean up the scene a bit by smearing the blood around the floor with some sheets, which he shoved into one of the sleeping bags. In this process, they left behind a footprint. It was a men's size 9.5 shoe. A large red flashlight was found by the bodies. It had tape over the lens and a pinhole cut into green plastic that was taped to the front so the beam would be smaller. Hours later, just as the residents of Tulsa, which was just 50 miles away, they were headed to work, and news reports started airing on radio stations. 3 Girl Scouts had been found dead at Camp Scott near Locust Grove, which was soon updated to 3 Tulsa Girl Scouts had been beaten to death overnight at Camp Scott. And remember, 140 campers were at Camp Scott. So the parents that were hearing this on the radio were justifiably horrified and immediately went back to Magic Empire Council headquarters, which was in Tulsa. Magic Empire Council, I believe, is like the umbrella company of the Girl Scouts. I don't know much about that, but parents started showing up, terrified that it was their kid who had been murdered, praying that when the buses arrived that it was their daughter that was going to walk off the bus, something that the parents of Lori, Michelle, and Denise wouldn't experience. They were told that there had been, quote, an accident. Charles Farmer, the father of Lori, was informed of the death of his daughter by the executive director of the organization, Magic Empire Council, after she called, of course, her insurance company and their attorney. She was very brief with him. Very disgusting, but yeah. Still, no one knew what the hell happened, why these girls were dead, and who did it. OSBI agent Larry Bowles, who is he's a Cherokee Indian, which is not a random detail. I'll come back to that. He met the ambulance at the medical examiner's office, and here's his account. If you guys didn't like the last clip, you're not going to like this one.
I'd investigated a lot of homicides before this, but I wasn't really ready for what I saw. It was obvious they had been sexually assaulted. There was an overkill. Excessive force was used to subdue these little girls. Then when Dr. Hoffman got to the 3rd sleeping bag, he unzipped it, and it was Lori Farmer. And he opened the sleeping bag and laid the side of it back. And I'll never forget what she looked like. She looked like she was asleep. And I thought maybe she'd wake up. But then I knew that wasn't impossible. She was just at peace. She had a flashlight stuck between her legs, just like she went to sleep and wanted to make sure that she could find a flashlight, should she need it during the night. But she was, lying there, so at peace, just like a little baby asleep. And I kept wanting her to wake up because I could see no injuries on her. And I thought, she can't be dead. And I took her out of the sleeping bag, laid her on the table. I still saw no injuries. And as I looked at her in the sleeping bag, the only thing I was hoping for, after I finally convinced myself that she was dead, I was hoping that maybe at least one of the little girls hadn't been sexually assaulted. Maybe just one of them hadn't been. And as the medical examiner pulled the sleeping bag away from her, I could see her panties had been pulled up and they were twisted to one side. And I knew then she would never wear her underpants that way. And I knew that she had probably been sexually assaulted.
I found that one really, really heavy. Well, Larry broke my heart, and that was just an awful thing for anything to happen or for anyone to have to deal with. As investigators scoured the camp, they found something other than the tape, rope, and flashlight. Pairs of women's glasses had been taken from the tents, and they were left scattered on the ground, as if someone tried them on and discarded them. They quickly tied the bindings to a nearby farmer Jack Schroff. He was taken into custody for questioning. A local paper immediately ran a story with the headline, quote, "Lie detector given is here." Lie detector... See, this is where I edit myself. Lie detector test is given here in Girl Scout slangs. And then on the 4 pages in, it just said Slayer ... with a large picture of Jack. He passed his polygraph, though, and evidence was found that his barn had been broken into, the rope and the tape stolen from him. He eventually would be hospitalized from the stress of all the prank phone calls and harassment that he received because of that headline. And this also marks the beginning of the citizens' distrust in the investigation right off the bat. Maybe this will be fun. Who knows? Y'all like dogs? Dogs are fun, right? Let's do a dog story.
I've been petting my dog to get through this.
I'm so sorry. So these dogs.
June, are you gonna kill a dog now?
This dog dies, I'm out.
Byron.
I mean,
does the dog die in this live stream?
Byron.
Gosh, darn it, man.
June 16th. There's a team.
Here,
right.
sexually assaulted children. Oh, and the dog dies.
We got this. June 16th, there's a team of 3 tracking dogs. They were flown in from Pennsylvania to assist in the investigation. They were known as the Wonder Dogs, which is kind of fun.
Oh, good boys.
Yeah, and the owners actually promised that they would have a suspect within 48 hours. And they were actually, I think in Pennsylvania, they had helped solve a case by picking out a suspect in a lineup who actually did commit the crime. So I don't know how they do that. They sniff out crime. These guys are the freaking Wonder Dogs.
That's right. Dogs are better than humans.
Yeah, and these are great dogs. And at a command meeting, there was mention of a new suspect, actually. Sheriff Gwen Weaver suggested looking into a man named Gene Hart, another Cherokee man who had... He had twice escaped jail. I'll get back to the dogs. I'm sorry. He's been on the run for 2 years. In his younger years, though, he was a local football hero. He's very, very much well liked by the community, which was possibly the reason that he was able to elude police for so long. However, in June of 1966, Gene abducted 2 young pregnant women from the parking lot of a Tulsa nightclub. He drove them into Mays County, deep into the woods, where he brutally assaulted them as well, sodomized them. The victims described him as making low, guttural, inhuman noises as well. During the drive, he would force one or both of them to ride in the trunk of the car, and both victims wore eyeglasses as well. Strangely, when one of the 2 victims would be in the car with Gene, he asked to try on their glasses to see if the prescription was right for him. When he was done with these women, he taped their faces and left them to die in the trunk, which thank goodness they didn't. Did anyone watch American Crime Story? I think season 2? Where the what's his name? The gentleman who killed Versace taped the face of that man. It's just horrifying. Just an awful visual. But yeah, thank goodness those 2 survived, and he was captured and eventually pled guilty to that charge. And then he escaped prison twice. I don't know how you do that, but he had at that point he was convicted and was supposed to serve out over 300 years in prison. When he escaped the second time, they just couldn't find him. But after the announcement of Gene as a potential suspect, another officer spoke up, saying that he heard rumor that a local medicine man had placed a curse on the Wonder Dogs. See, I didn't do this. That they would die. Everyone laughed except DSBI agent Harvey Pratt. He was a full-blood Cheyenne Arapaho. And let's hear from him.
When I get involved in those investigations of Indians who were talking, and the rumors that we heard during the the investigation of the little girls that were coming out of the Indian culture, especially since that was a heavily concentration of Native Americans up in there. So we started getting a lot of that, and I started picking up a lot of that. And I had to consider that, especially of things after I had learned on my own through the investigation that led towards Indian culture and towards Indian suspects.
I'm sorry. On June 18th, 2 of the 3 wonder dogs were dead. The Rottweiler named Butts died of heat stroke, and one of the German Shepherds, his name was Harris, was hit by a car while being returned home. I'm sorry. I am bad at my job. Not a whole lot of progress was being made over the next couple days. Rumors of a tall, skinny boy with a knife and hatchet talking to a group of Boy Scouts. There was more evidence of burglaries in the area. But then on June 22nd, there was a break in the case. Inside a cave 2 miles from the camp, investigators discovered 2 pictures of a wedding. And some newspaper was that matched some, newspaper that matched what was crumpled into the back of a flashlight. Sam, you're old. Remember when sometimes you have a flashlight that would kind of go in and out because the
and you need to add something to put some more pressure on the springs.
Exactly. So inside the flashlight, there was some newspaper shoved in there to help with the connection, and that matched the newspaper that was in this cave. And then there was evidence of 4 fires side by side, which was something believed to have great meaning in Native American culture. Also, around the fire were ripped off filters of cigarette butts, and I'll let Harvey Pratt explain a little bit more about that.
And I noticed immediately was that first fire, and then when I looked, I noticed that there were other little fires scattered around it, kind of in a half a circle, back coming around this way, and to circle it up by 4 fires. 4 is very significant in Indian culture. For the 4 seasons, the 4 directions, winds, 4 major colors, things like that are used in ceremonies. And I noticed the cigarette butts, and we found a book of matches, and I saw the cigarette butts, and I noticed that the filters had been snapped off of them. Well, to me that meant something, because I was aware that sometimes when you smoke among Indians, and they smoke for a reason, and they're going to cement or consecrate something, they would smoke. We're going to smoke over this. It's good medicine. We're going to smoke over it. I break the filter off to get rid of if they don't have a pipe or their own tobacco, they would take away that last piece of civilization and throw the filter away and smoke it direct of a cigarette. Well, I noticed there was a couple of butts that the filters had been broken off, and then the filters, a couple of pieces, and then I saw the remains of the little pieces of cedar branches, and at that point I assumed and felt relatively sure in my mind that someone was down there that was an Indian and had used this as either to purify or to sanctify himself and smoked over it. And I think that's what that cave was for. The man had used that to help himself. Indian medicine.
And here's a disclaimer. I can't tell if the sources I've used in this report are fully sensitive or currently accurate culturally. So if I have or do say something offensive, know that it comes from a place of ignorance. I'm doing my absolute best. I thought Harvey did a great job explaining that, especially since
Hey, buddy. I thought we talked about your best.
Not good enough?
Just because it's your best doesn't mean it's the best.
I'm trying my best.
All right.
It's all
great,
I can
Byron.
do.
Yeah, we'll take
thanks. After publishing it's those photos that they found in the cave, they published them in newspapers trying to identify the people in them. They were 2 images from a wedding. It was determined that these were they were a couple who had their photos developed by a guy. He was a prison guard who was moonlighting as a photographer. And this guy, Gene Hart, was actually an assistant to this moonlighting prison guard wedding photographer. Gene had learned this skill in jail. And So that pretty much directly connected these photos to Gene, especially since the pictures they think he kept with him because the bride resembled his ex-wife quite a bit. Or, theory, Sheriff Glenn Weaver, the man who during that meeting said that Gene Hart was the guy who probably did it, he also had access to these pictures. He could have planted them in the cave. Who knows? Maybe we'll talk about that more later. But only 10 days after the murders, on June 23rd, Gene Hart was officially charged. An extensive manhunt began, implementing some of the earliest use of heat tracking via helicopter. I believe the National Guard assisted in a grid search, Sam, which is kind of interesting. 1977,
really?
Yeah. Richard Geis, the father of Michelle, along with the volunteers and hundreds of law enforcement agents, scoured the woods, and these searches continued for months. In one location, searchers found a note scrawled on a rock wall. This note said, 77-6-17. The killer was here. Bye-bye, fools. Which I believe it's a very interesting, unique way of writing the date. I believe it's
the wrong date. That's the wrong way to write the date.
Yeah, I don't know.
Your society would have to be monsters to write the date like that.
It's kind of a mess.
They do it in China.
Is that right? Interesting.
Yeah.
I heard
everybody does.
I heard it was maybe a military thing, but I could be wrong there as well. I don't know. July 9th, Camp Scott reopens, but only for day camp. In September, the parents of two of the murdered girls filed a $3 million lawsuit against the Magic Empire Council. Which is good. So now, the documentary Someone Cry for the Children that I used as one of my main sources goes far more heavily into the Native American medicine man, tobacco medicine aspect of the story. In fact, there's a story about Agent Pratt using medicine on his bullets to make them more accurate, to increase his hiding and tracking abilities. He's even attacked by a spooky black cat after hearing rumors that Gene is using shape-shifting abilities to avoid capture. And that's all fun and spooky, but that's more Kelly's stuff, so I am skipping it. But again...
So, I mean, I feel like that is kind of emblematic of law enforcement efforts on reservations today.
What do you mean by that?
Like missing and murdered Indigenous women. Like,
oh yeah, which is
like, oh hey, I don't know, let's have some wonder dogs, and wow, that didn't work fine.
Call in the wonder dogs, yeah. I don't know. I just feel really out of my depth as a white person talking about someone else's culture like I'm some authority. I don't know anything about this. After months of searching, though, and still no Gene, parents and the police became impatient, and they turn up the pressure. With the help of an informant, it's determined that Gene has been hiding inside the Cherokee community, possibly staying with a medicine man in Cookson Hills. So agents confronted the wife of this medicine man.
I want the man that killed 3 little Girl Scouts, and you all are hiding him. If you're playing a game with us, we're through playing games. We're starting to indict people. We know a lot about you, and like I said, I'm not interested in you long, but we're interested in Gene Leroy Hart. We want him. And if you don't cooperate with me today, you're going to be indicted by a federal grand jury. And if it's a game to you, I can assure you it's stop being fun right now. I can tell you one more thing, that up to this point, the 3 fathers of these little girls, they're pretty uptight. Even though it's been almost a year ago, they're still pretty uptight about it. One's a police officer, and one's a doctor. One's a businessman in Tulsa. They have been calling us repeatedly, wanting to know. They know that we know who the mediator is. We haven't given any names. But I can assure you, by the time the sun goes down tonight, they're going to know your names and your addresses.
Cool, guys. Just threaten to dox a whole community and threaten vigilante justice. Great work.
Low-key.
It did work, though. Authorities now had the location of the suspect, and a raid of this three-room tar and paper shack owned by an elderly man named Sam Pigeon Jr. was planned. On April 6th, 1978, after 10 months on the run, Gene Leroy Hart was captured without incident, although it could have been worse. They knocked on the front door. He opened, saw them, tried to run out the back door, but they had him surrounded. They did that shotgun thing and pointed at him, one reportedly yelling, "Do you want to die today?" Which, who knows if that's true. But yeah, he surrendered. So he didn't say much after he was captured. The only thing he said was a response to the question why he murdered those girls, and he just said, "You're not going to pin that on me." It was 1978, so the agents, of course, posed themselves with the cuffed suspect for a picture, but they couldn't help but notice something strange about him. He was wearing women's glasses. I think I actually have a picture of this. If you guys want to stand by, see a picture of
Okay.
good old. What do we got?
I mean, just in a vacuum, if a person was living on the edges of society like that, especially in the 70s, like any prescription glasses that you could find that would almost meet your needs, whether you found them in a garbage can or wherever, it would be like you'd take what you could get, I would assume.
That's true. And
Especially in a minority community.
Exactly. Where's my Gene Hart?
Also, I love that that's like, oh, guys, we should probably arrest him and shoot him. Women's glasses.
Yeah, they were. It was not great, guys.
Byron, will you get to the point where we find out if there's DNA evidence or not?
I will get there. Yeah, April 11th. Are you listening to this whole thing?
Hey, Kelly, will you please talk into the outside?
April 11th. He pleaded not guilty. And this being the largest, most expensive search in the area at the time, it's not surprising that every aspect of this case from here on out was both a circus and a shit show. During the search, residents grew frustrated at the efforts of authorities, and more people questioned the accusations against Gene. He had become a bit of a folk hero. There was an instance where the parents, this is horrible this is just tough. There was an instance where the parents of one of the murdered girls were in town for the trial. They were hungry, so they went to a restaurant. It was very busy. They sat down at the bar, only to find donation jars for Gene's legal defense, which is just a really tough situation. There were chicken dinner benefits held, and there was even bumper stickers sold that said, "The Heart of Gene Country." Regarding the distrust, after a second search of Sam Pigeon Jr.'s shack, authorities recovered a mirror and a toy corncob pipe that would eventually be tied back to Camp Scott. Items that Sam testified, Sam Pigeon, he hadn't seen them before, and he kind of implied that they had been planted under the bed. During the trial, several pieces of evidence were brought forth, and remember, this was Kelly, 1978. Forensics was in its infancy. There was sperm, a strand of hair, what was found in the cave, what was in the shack, and John McLeod.
McLeod.
You guys, listen. I'm doing my best. John McLeod.
If only there was someone that lived in Ireland that could tell us how to pronounce that.
Please, someone from Ireland. John was a Cornell University professor of anatomy and an expert on human reproduction. He testified that sperm taken from the bodies and from Hart's underwear were, quote, quite similar, which this was a big shocker because he didn't believe that he could produce sperm because he had a vasectomy. But his vasectomy didn't work. So.
Sad trombone.
Yeah, it is a bummer. But I mean, quote, quite similar. That's how advanced our forensics are here. Anne Reed, a forensic chemist, said, quote, hair samples taken from the bodies and from Hart's head were, quote, exactly the same. She said that they came from either Hart or from someone's hair, quote, with the same microscopic characteristics. However, as of 2015, this technique of forensics had been discredited
I was
entirely.
just going to say, what does that even mean?
Don't know.
Microscopic. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's a two-part process. You shave the hair off so you compare it.
Yeah.
And while someone is doing that in the next room, then the phrenologist can come in and do the head thing once all the hair is gone.
Perfect. Spoken like a true Anne Reed. An associate of Gene testified that he'd been known to modify flashlights in a similar way to the one that was left behind, the one that was taped with the pinhole. I don't know if I've ever heard of anyone other than Sam or Gene doing that. Sam, you do that all the time.
What do I do?
I don't know. Something with flashlights. I'm just accusing you of a
very
crime.
careful about agreeing to anything that I did that's for the story.
You almost did it. And you guys, you heard me discuss the evidence in the cave and in the shack, the evidence that it could have easily been planted by Sheriff Glenn Weaver, who we know had a little beef with Gene since Gene escaped him twice. And then there's the bloody footprint, the 9.5 size male boot print. Gene was a size 11, and that seems like a hard thing to get on your foot. Obviously, the trial is much, much more complicated than I'm making it now. It drug on for a long time, but I feel like I wasted most of my time writing about the messy parts of the story, so if you want to know more about the trial specifically, you can read a book called Tent Number 8 by Gloyd McKoy, which I believe is the worst first-named McKoy, and that's coming from someone named Byron. On March 30th...
Byron's a great name.
There are no poets named Gloyd.
Gloyd? Yeah. March 30th, 1979, a jury of 6 men and 6 women, after deliberating for less than an hour, came back with a verdict. Not guilty. The courtroom erupted. Everyone was thrilled except, of course, the families of the victims who stood in shock. Order was demanded in the court, and Gene was whisked away, back into the arms of the prison system, headed to McAllister, Oklahoma, to serve out the rest of his 308-year sentence from his prior conviction. Let's not forget about that. Guys, I don't know if Gene did it. It sure doesn't look good for him, especially that woman's glasses detail, but as one of you pointed out, that very well could just be the glasses that worked for him in a low, impoverished community. I don't know. But yeah, it's times like these where I wish that police back then did better work at documenting the things they did and could.
So did they get any other suspects? Jesus fucking Christ!
They did have one other guy. This scary man named Wild Bill. William A. Stevens. They thought he may have done it because he's a bit of a loose cannon, a wild card. Actually, at trial, Kelly, a woman and her son testified that Bill came into their home the day of the murders. He had scratches on his arms and red stains on his shoes. He was even linked to a flashlight on the scene, but he was cleared of suspicion by a canceled paycheck and a time card from the place where he worked. And the woman and son who brought up him as a suspect were actually charged with perjury. Yeah, but Wild Bill, he died in jail anyway. He was stabbed to death at 27 years old. Who knows? Maybe
rough age.
Ooh, the 27. Yeah. I don't know if it was a Sheriff Weaver stabbing. That guy seemed like he's pretty corrupt, but yeah. I have trouble with this one.
What part bothered you?
Most of it. But speaking of prison, though, Gene Hart, he only made it a month post-trial before his heart gave out. He was working out, pumping iron, and had a heart attack. He was only 35 years old.
Hey, he died doing what he loved. That's about all you can do for.
Yeah. When it all comes down, I don't know who killed Lori, Michelle, and Denise, but I do find it somewhat hard to believe that it was only one person and that they did this all as quietly as they must have. I think that if it was Gene, that he had help, but unfortunately for the families, this case remains unsolved. I have no idea who did it, but that's the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders, you guys. I'm sorry.
Great job, Byron.
Just in time for the holiday, as always. Be.
Wow. I miss that heavy sinking feeling that I get from
crime too, right? Like, don't you feel like, I don't know, it's just so intense to take three victims.
Well, but remember, he started with taking 2 pregnant women, and that's another thing I didn't really bring up. A lot of people in the community felt like it was possible that the pregnant women were lying, that they just got caught. Well, I don't know, because that doesn't make any sense. If they were literally left for dead in a trunk of a car with tape wrapped around their heads, but people were starting rumors that the women just wanted to leave their husbands and
just being hysterical.
I guess more
freaking hysterical women.
Yeah, a little bit more of that, but interesting case.
Yeah, super interesting. Great one.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry,
Great
Kelly.
job, Byron. That was excellent.
I appreciate it.
I only cried a little bit.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to make anyone cry. I
had to
It
make
was very
my
well
mother send
delivered.
pictures of my daughters like 12 times.
You went and hugged them all?
No, they're at Grandma's house, and
That's
I made
right.
Grandma send me a bunch of pictures of them because I was freaking out. And
Were you
getting
listening the whole time?
mad.
Why weren't you on camera? People would have loved to see your freaked out face.
No, they wouldn't have.
You've been listening to an Audio Wool original, produced by Byron McKoy, theme music provided by Cemeteries. For more programs like this, visit audiowool.co.